Hello, everyone. We are live with Denise Eger, Rabbi Denise Eger. I'm going to go to gallery view so everyone can see you, who is the author of this beautiful book, Mishkan Gava, which you're not going to be able to see, but we're going to share. Denise, do you want to share I don't know how to do that. We're going to share sorry.
Here it is.
Excellent. Gorgeous book. A beautiful book, very powerful, a celebration of LGBTQ Jewish life and ritual. And we are so thrilled to do this book club conversation. I'm just going to go and do a watch party. So anyone who's watching right now can share it from the Zioness Facebook page to your personal page and host a watch party so that your friends and family can view it and can get engaged, learn about the book and about Rabbi Eger's activism, and also learn about Zioness, which she is a proud board member of. So I'm going to quickly do that, share the video. There it is.
I'm going to do that too.
How do I do a watch party? Watch party. So when you click share, you have the option of watch party. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, for anyone who's watching who is not already following Zioness, we hope you will follow Zioness and learn about our mission, which is to provide an activist home for American Jews and allies who want to be involved in progressive activism to advance social and racial and economic and gender justice in this country, and want to do it as proud Zionists. Don't want to check any piece of their identity at the door in their activism. It couldn't be a more connected theme to what we're going to talk about today with this book, Mishkan Gava. And so we're just going to get started. I'm going to first introduce Rabbi Denise Eger. Denise Eger truly exemplifies the word trailblazer, and I really mean that. I'm not just saying it. She is the founding rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami, West Hollywood's Reform Synagogue. Her bio is so long, it would take up this whole hour. So I can't, it's true. You know, it's true. So I can't read the whole bio, but I'm going to take some of the highlights, although the whole thing is just a list of highlights. Rabbi Eger officiated the first legal wedding for a lesbian couple in the state of California. She is the immediate past president of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which, for those who don't know, is the largest organization of rabbis in the world with more than 2,000 Reform rabbis worldwide. In March of 2015, Rabbi Eger became the 60th president of the CCAR, becoming the first openly gay or lesbian rabbi to that position, which is so, you just must be so proud of that. Rabbi Eger is also past president of the Southern California Board of Rabbis, the first woman and openly gay person to be in that role, and a past president of the Pacific Association of Reform Rabbis. She co-chaired the Gay and Lesbian Rabbinic Network for 2 years. She is a past treasurer of the Women's Rabbinic Network. She was the founding president of the Lesbian, Gay, and Bisexual Interfaith Clergy Association. She served on the board of the No on Night campaign, No on Prop 22, and sat on the board of the Equality for All, No on Prop 8. She was a founder of the California Faith for Equality, and she is a member of the Religion and Faith Council of the Human Rights Campaign. Rabbi Eger currently serves on the board of Zioness, and she's also a trustee of the Reform Pension Board. And very importantly, Rabbi Eger is married to Rabbi Eleanor Steinman and has an adult son living in Texas. And hi, Ellie, I'm sure you're watching too. Okay, Denise, so I remember when you first posted on social media, I think it was about a year ago, that you were compiling a book of Jewish LGBTQ prayer. And I remember texting you immediately and saying, I can't wait, we have to do a Zioness book club. And you said, of course. And it feels, you know, both like 14 lifetimes ago and also just last week that we had that conversation. So tell us about the process, you know, what made you want to take on this role and you know, be part of this, and how did it go? You know, how do you put together a book with all of these different contributions?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, Amanda, for having me today, and I want to say hello to all my fellow Zionesses across the country who are watching. One of the things I'm most proud of is to be a board member of this incredible Zioness movement that marries my progressive credentials in terms of social justice and my love for our homeland of Eretz Israel. That doesn't always mean we agree with the government of Israel, but we definitely want to create a world where justice prevails everywhere. So thanks for asking. This book, Mishkan, is the Hebrew name, and I'll explain that in a minute. English, Where Pride Dwells, and it's a hashtag dwells. So if you all search hashtag, you'll see it come up in a lot of different places. It's published by the Central Conference of American Rabbis, which, as you mentioned earlier, is the largest and oldest rabbinical organization in North America, and it's Reform rabbis around the world. And we have one of the largest, if not the largest, Jewish press. So this is Mishkan Ga'ava, is actually the LGBTQ plus supplement to the Reform movement's Sidurim and Machzorim. Our Sidur, our Machzor is known as Mishkan Tefillah. Mishkan was the ancient tabernacle. Tefillah means prayer, and our High Holy Day Sidur, Machzor, is Mishkan HaNefesh, the tabernacle of the soul. So this book is really meant to be used in both individuals and communities as an LGBTQ plus supplement. As you know, Amanda, and you shared from I'm the founding rabbi of Congregation Kol Ami in West Hollywood, California, and West Hollywood is a gay mecca. It's kind of like Provincetown or Key West or the Castro in San Francisco, and we have a large LGBTQ population in our congregation and in our city, and I've spent the good part of my 3+ decades in the rabbinate serving in the LGBTQ plus community, as well as the larger world, as a human rights activist, a women's activist, and an LGBTQ rights activist, and a passionate Zionist as well. And so a lot of times there wasn't any material, so a good chunk of the book are from things I wrote and created, and rituals and ceremonies and prayers to use that I needed to serve my community through the years. And I realized that there was really an opportunity here to invite others, both some rabbis, cantors, lay people, to also share their experience and their writing. And so this book is an anthology. It's a collection, and it's divided into 2 parts. The first half of the book are prayers and meditations and essays that will be more applicable to the individual. So if we open the pages, and we were in a minute, prayers for the Friday night Shabbat table. What do you say when a husband traditionally says to a wife at the Shabbat table and reads from the book of Proverbs, Eshet Chayil? Well, what if your family doesn't look like that? What do you say to your spouse? So this book provides beautiful text to embrace our Shabbat, to bless our spouses regardless of gender, or if we're anywhere on the spectrum of gender, of identity. What happens when we're transitioning genders, and the process of that? What if you're afraid to come out, whether you're LGBT or Q, to family and friends? There's a blessing that deals with that anxiety. So one half of the book is personal, and for private prayer and personal prayer, and perhaps prayer in shul. The second half of the book is what I call for the queer. So just like we in the Jewish world have the Jewish holiday cycle, right? We just Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Hanukkah, Purim, Passover, Shavuot, and we have unique prayers for that. The LGBTQ world has unique and holidays as well. Gay Pride Month, National Coming Out Day, Transgender Day of Remembrance, Lesbian Visibility Day, Harvey Milk Day, World AIDS Day. Important days that express the inner life and communal life of the LGBTQ world. And so this book also has unique prayers to be used either perhaps in your synagogue for gay pride, or to help make your Passover Seder more inclusive, maybe a Pride Seder, or for Harvey Milk Day, which is on Harvey Milk's birthday. It's actually a state holiday here in California, or for Transgender Visibility Day. Were things that could be used in a communal setting, both Jewish and interfaith.
Love it. I can't say enough how much I hope that people will buy this book, which you can buy on the CCAR website, and we'll put the link in the comments box right now. And I also should have said at the beginning, if anyone has questions, you can drop them in the Q&A box or in the comments. We'll be monitoring both, and also on the Facebook live stream, you can leave some questions there if you have any. But so I want to say, I was really moved over and over again throughout the book by the celebration of identity, which of course is the whole point of it. Different readings, thank God for making us who we are, whatever identities we hold. And I really feel like this is something groundbreaking, and maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should just be obvious, right? But it's not. And there are so many people who are facing identity challenges, not just LGBTQ people, but the LGBTQ community has led the charge in so many ways for people to stand proudly with their full authentic selves. And it's something obviously with Zioness we talk about all the time. How transformative is this in the LGBTQ world and in the Jewish world? For there to be something that says, we're going to be both Jewish and LGBTQ. We're going to make sure that we bring both of those pieces of ourselves everywhere we go, and that we talk about the relationship between them. How new is this?
Well, the LGBTQ Jewish movement's been around for quite a while now. And there are individual prayer books, Sidurim, that congregations that are primarily LGBTQ have published. So, for example, Congregation Beth Simchat Torah, CBST in New York, and Sha'ar Zahav in San Francisco, primarily LGBTQ congregations, each have published their own prayer books, and with some unique things for LGBTQ experience. But anything like this. This is a denominational, official, Siddur, published, prayer book, rituals published by a denomination. It's groundbreaking. It's a first, not Christian, any other kind of religious organization has a prayers collected in one edition just like this. So that's really, really historic. And also what I think makes it different is the breadth of people who have contributed to this book. There are rabbis, clergy from all streams of Judaism in here, not just the Reform movement. There are some recognizable Jewish LGBTQ activists who have written essays about and reflecting on their Jewish and LGBTQ experience. Evan Wolfson, who was the leader of the marriage equality movement and one of the leading folks. Professor Joy Ladin from Yeshiva University, who's an openly transgender professor and written a lot about her Judaism and her journey. Roberta Kaplan, who led, an attorney who led marriage equality in the Supreme Court. Bruce Valanche, a great friend of my congregation, a noted comedian and comedy writer and Broadway performer. Maybe some of you in New York saw him in Hairspray a number of years ago. Wrote an essay about his experience of being Jewish and gay during the HIV crisis. Robin Tyler, a noted LGBT feminist activist who in the old days used to put on all the Women's Music Festival, and that's women with a WOMYN, throughout the country. So it's a very interesting collection of both lay people, of queer Jewish activists, rabbis who wrote from all the different streams of Judaism.
Love it. I'm always impressed by you, Denise, but I'm impressed that you remember so many of the contributors to this book. You could just name them like that.
They're friends. They're also my friends.
Still,
I've been in this movement a long time.
I know.
And when I was 28 years old, I was ordained, and I started serving a gay congregation at 28 in the late 80s. And there weren't a lot of us that were openly LGBTQ at that time. There weren't. So just a handful of us. Most of us weren't fully out or only half out, or and so I've had the privilege and honor to work with a lot of the leading activists of the LGBTQ civil rights movement in our country. Some Jewish, some not. to be at the forefront of fighting for a cure for HIV/AIDS, that we're still fighting for a cure for that, of bringing comfort and to those who have suffered from HIV/AIDS, and who are still thriving with HIV/AIDS. And to watch a number of generations of young people come up through the ranks, if you will, whether it was the fight for keeping teachers not being fired as it being a teacher if you gay, through the marriage equality battles, and also in the Judaism to help push the boundaries, to help people get ordained. When I was ordained, you couldn't be openly gay and be a rabbi. We were all had to be kind of surreptitious and under the cloud and hidden away, and I was part of that battle, if you will, to help push the boundaries to allow LGBTQ people to become ordained as rabbis and cantors in the Reform movement, and then helping kind of advise in the background around the conservative movement and beyond. So I've been very privileged to know a lot of the contributors. Don't know them all, but I've come to know them, and what a great collection and a varied experience that is reflected in the book.
Well, I'm going to say you're privileged to know them and they're privileged to know you, because you are equally a leader in this movement. It's not like you got to meet some cool leaders. You were leading, and that's why you know them, and that's amazing. So the next question is sort of a long question, because I was reflecting so much myself, and so I want to just give a little bit of my own thoughts. But there's so many readings in here that are so moving. And, as I said before, I really encourage everyone to buy this book, whether you are LGBTQ or whether you're an ally to the LGBTQ community, because it really, for me, and I told Denise this, it sort of gave me feelings and understanding that are going to make me a much stronger ally and a much better ally. And, it's hard. You can't empathize with people that you've never been in their shoes and that you can't be in their shoes. You can have compassion, and, you can have humanity. And there are lots of feelings that you can have wanting, to fight for civil rights for communities that you are not a part of. But this is honestly, truly the closest that I've come to being able to be in someone else's shoes. And some of these readings were so deeply moving, and some in a painful way and some in a very inspiring way. But I really have never had an opportunity that this book made me very emotional. I have to say, one of the most powerful prayers for me was the blessing for my LGBTQ ancestors. And funnily enough, Denise and I were texting today, and she said she wanted to share some readings tonight. And I said, yes, can we please share this reading about the blessing for my LGBTQ ancestors? And she said, that's one of the ones that I really wanted to share, which maybe is a coincidence, or maybe it's something divine. I don't know. But I really have to say, I found this both beautiful and devastating, this prayer. And, Denise, what you were just saying is really a perfect segue into this feeling, because that prayer was a reminder of the pain that so many people had to endure, even in very recent memory. It's not like, these battles are old battles that are, these are hard fought battles that are very recent. And for people in my generation, while I vividly remember the marriage equality coming to fruition, I vividly remember the fights against Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, and I'm a lawyer, so I closely followed the full faith and credit arguments that were being jockeyed back and forth when it came to DOMA. And so even for someone like me who followed this fight in so many different ways and who feels deeply committed as an ally to the advancement of the LGBTQ movement, it's still actually, and this is crazy to say, but it still actually sometimes feels like unbelievable that people, just a few years older than me had to endure this trauma of being in the closet, because, it's been just a few years really since these battles were won. And I know there are limited wins. I know there's still a lot more work to do. But
Let me share some of this with you. I want to share a couple of the readings from here, and I think, Manda, you rightly reflect that we think of some of these major civil rights moments in the LGBTQ world, but there's still so much left that's not done.
Yeah.
And particularly for our LGBTQ seniors, people who remember a time before, not just before there was marriage equality, but people who we're at the very nascent beginning of any kind of public LGBTQ activism in this 1964, I believe it was, in Philadelphia, on Independence Day, was one of the very first public gatherings and marches for homosexual rights. So, if we look at the history of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, uh, queer questioning allies plus movement, there's still people who live with the scars from a time when they would never be out. And still today, as there's a senior generation in their late 70s and 80s and 90s, if think about it, in a nursing home, they may not be out even in that environment. And so, we have to be sensitive to the fact that somebody who's in their 20s today, who has grown up with television of positive queer characters, who has never really quite understood, 10 year in California, we got marriage in 2008, even though we had to fight for it. If you were 10 in 2008, most of your life there's been some kind of legalized marriage somewhere, not actually, but there was a time for when people didn't have any rights. And so I want to share this with you by Dave Yedida. It's just a most beautiful prayer. He suggests it in addition or to replace the Avot and Imahot prayer in the Amidah or the Tefillah section, but I think it stands on its own. A blessing from my LGBTQ ancestors. You who fought to love. You who prayed to the same God I do. You who insisted on your dignity, even when the world said you had none. You who died of AIDS while fighting for a cure, so that people like me might live. You who were shot in a massacre while on a dance floor. You who could not come out and held your secret until your dying day. You who were insulted, shamed, beaten, and brutalized, yet kept walking. You your fierceness, your originality, your art, and your voice to this world. I walk in your memory. I walk this path, smoothed and chartered by your sacrifice towards justice, towards holiness, towards freedom. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen ve'ezrat Sarah. Blessed are you, Adonai, Sarah's helper, Abraham's shield. Again, a beautiful understanding not only of the different phases within the ways in which we've been out or through the generations, but a beautiful tribute to the variety of experiences, young and old, as queer people that we've experienced, and a blessing for our ancestors, because we think about our Jewish ancestors, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel and Leah, and maybe adding Bilhah and Zilpah, the other wives of Jacob, in there. But we don't think about our queer ancestors, given to us by their courage and fierceness, and we owe them a great debt of gratitude and thanks. I want to share a couple other things because, as you said, Amanda, this book has a lot of things that can be shared by not just LGBT people, LGBTQ people, but also for allies. And there's lots of contributions here that could be anybody. And I want to share particularly a prayer before marching for equality. It was written by Rabbi Greg Weissman, who's a rabbi in the Boca Raton area in Florida, Temple Beth El there. Heterosexual cisgendered man wrote this as an ally, a strong ally. We may be a while till we're actually marching together, because our pride parade certainly, wherever we are across this country, we won't be marching this year. We're going to do virtual marches. But whether we're online and doing virtual marches or shoulder to shoulder, once again, I think this speaks beautifully to what it means. Imagine if your temple in a pride parade, this is something that you could gather to say together before you marched with your group. Or maybe Zionesses, next time we have a pride parade, can recite this together.
Absolutely, we will. We were supposed to be in Tel Aviv for Pride this summer.
Yes. Well, we're hopefully something. There's a big plan for something nationally, virtually in October. So, a prayer before marching for equality. We have marched. When God called to Abram, Lech Lecha, go forth. Abram walked to the land God showed him. When we endured the pain of enslavement in Egypt, we put one foot in front of the other. When the sea split, we marched towards freedom, celebrating with songs of joy. In Selma, we prayed with our feet. We have run in fear and dashed in triumph. We sang the words of our movement as we marched for the values we stand for. And so today we march. We march to tell the world that every human being is created B'Tselem Elohim. We march to show pride in those who share the beauty and wholeness of their identities. We march to show solidarity with those whose identities are known only to themselves. We march for those in fear who cannot march. We march as allies, we march as friends, we march as families, we march as Jews. Netzeh Hasadeh, let us go forth and let our message ring out that God loves us all, that we love us all, and that love conquers all.
I love this one so much too. Those are my two favorites, the prayer for ancestors and the prayer before a Pride March, because anyone who's ever been to a Pride March knows that it is a magical experience to see everyone just showing up so proud, so happy, so excited. I've never seen anything like it. Everyone's dancing, everyone's singing. It's pure joy. It really is. And no matter where in the world you're celebrating, Pride is really an extraordinary a thing to witness and even more to participate in. Even as an ally, I'm sure it's more fun if you're a member of the LGBTQ community, but it's pretty amazing as an ally. So whenever there is another Pride parade, and whether it's digital or virtual, or in person, I hope lots of people will join us. And if you are not LGBT, I guess even if you are, you can read that prayer and feel part of something bigger. And I'm going to come back to this as part of a question I have later. I want to go back to something you said in the previous question, Denise. You were talking a lot about queer identity, and I noticed very approvingly of how many prayers did talk about queer identity in the book. And you and I have talked about this. I must admit, I've had this conversation with other LGBTQ leaders as well. When to use the Q? When do you say LGBT? When do you say LGBTQ? Who likes the Q? Who doesn't like the Q? Because you can get yourself in trouble. And obviously you don't want to offend anyone ever. So I know there is no hard and fast rule, but and you actually, as someone who identifies as queer and proudly uses the word queer, I think don't fall into like the typical use of it. So help us out for people who want to be good allies. When should we use the term? And again, there's no hard and fast rule, but what's the general rule?
So just a teeny brief history lesson. Queer came to be used much more as a positive term in the 90s. It gets to be a mouthful. When I was coming up through the ranks as a young pup, we were all gay. Everybody was gay. Women's movement helped us claim our lesbian identity. So then it was L&G, lesbian gay. Bisexual folks said, hey, what about us? We have our own unique identity. So then it was lesbian, gay, bisexual. And our transgender family members said, we don't fit in any of those categories. So now we get LGBT. And then the Q gets added sometimes for people questioning, they don't know where they are on the sexual orientation spectrum or gender identity question. But in the 90s, people were like, what do you say? LGBT, too much, too many letters, I can't remember. So really in the 90s, people started to use the word queer. It's interesting, that was a derogatory term. If you ask people in their late 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, for many of them, that term, they can't say it because it was used as a term of shame and a term of hate and victimization. The 90s, a younger generation empowered the use of that word, reclaimed it with a fierceness, and so it's become a positive part of our lexicon. And I think an older generation, I hope, has gotten used to using it as a positive force to include a larger spectrum of people. I mean, now we talk about, even in the 2000s, we didn't talk about non-binary in that way, so this is a word that can be much more inclusive of everyone. And that's in part why I use it, and I'm comfortable using it. Because there's lots of other ways we can think about how people are queer. They don't fit in the box that the society wants to shove them into, and shouldn't have to be shoved into. And we just have to be sensitive to how people like to be called and what they like to be called. And that's an example. I will share one here. This book has has many things for our family and friends in the transgender community. There's a blessing for the first shave, a blessing for your first hormone treatment. Here's the morning blessing for non-binary Jews. Right in the morning Shachrit service, there's a blessing for a man, a blessing for a woman. Of course, we know from feminist perspective. The blessing for a man says in the tradition, "Thank you, God, for not making me a woman." You know, the patriarchy hard at work. But so here's a positive prayer for non-binary Jews, written by Rabbi Ahuva Zaks, who's a Reform rabbi. I think her congregation's in Virginia. Brucha at Adonai Eloheinu, koach ha'olam, asher bara et ha'adam, zachar u'nekeva. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, power of the universe, who has made human beings both masculine and feminine. And what's interesting for those of you that are Hebrew tuned, she mixes genders in the Hebrew. Hebrew is a gendered language like Spanish, like French, and she uses God here. The word for you, for God, is at in feminine, ata in Hebrew in masculine form. So she mixes a little bit of both here, which I think is the whole point of non-binary. You're not either or. You're not one or the other. Don't fit in a box. So I'm about that. We've really tried to be thinking about in this book, Where Pride Dwells is the English name, Where Pride Dwells, is that we're trying to be inclusive of everybody along that gender identity and sexual orientation spectrum.
So typically I would wait until the end to ask questions that pop up, but somebody wrote that they thought the Q meant questioning, and also what about the I that shows up sometimes?
So sometimes we get Q and Q, queer and questioning people, or there are people that whose gender identity and or sexual orientation, people shouldn't have to make a decision. I don't think. The I sometimes is used for intersex. Again, these are developing. Language is vibrant. Language changes, right? The slang that we used in the 60s, oh, something's groovy. We don't use groovy so much today, unless we're trying to be retro to a 1960s party. So language is ever changing, and the same thing is true with the ways we name ourselves. So LGBTQ questioning, that was some of it. Queer, we come to the 90s. Intersex, someone who is maybe both male and female in one person. Today we might call that non-binary, although there are very technical terms here. I don't think we really should need to go into all of that, and which is different than transgender. So we have to, again, I think the best advice is to say to somebody, ask them what they want to be called and how they see themselves. That's the holy way. And I think it speaks to Jewish theology, if you will, for a minute. I am a rabbi after all. I know this is a political, Zioness is kind of political, but
political, for me. A social justice activist organization, as you know.
Right. But, for me, my social justice work out of my idea of changing the world and comes from this idea. And it was mentioned in the prayer for marching for equality that we're created B'Tselem Elohim in Hebrew. We're created, as it says in the book of Genesis, in the image of God. And if that's in the image of God, then God is in the image of the non-binary person. God is in the image of the trans person. God is in the image of the lesbian, gay, bisexual, straight person, asexual person. That looks like God too. So we have to ask people who they are, what they would like to be called, and the labels that they own, and rather than we force them into a particular assumption or box that we have.
So I'm sort of laughing because you're preempting all of my questions, which
Sorry.
makes sense, totally fine, obviously, but it makes perfect sense that we would pick up on a lot of the same things for this kind of conversation. I kept thinking as I was reading it, and it's a constant theme throughout the book, that we talk a lot in Judaism and also in most faith traditions about how people are created in the image of God. And, this concept B'Tselem Elohim comes up over and over again throughout the book. This is, I think, an obvious question for you, but something that I think a lot of people have struggled with over time, and I still struggle to understand. If we really believe, as I believe we should, in B'Tselem Elohim, how did we and how do any Jewish institutions justify homophobia or transphobia or any other type of discrimination or bigotry against practicing Jews who want to be accepted into Jewish faith? And then wait, it's one question. And also, can you juxtapose, while you're talking about this overarching Jewish theme, which I believe very strongly in, with your reflection, your contribution, one of several of your contributions in the book, about the posters that religious bigots hold at LGBTQ rallies that say God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, which is on page 119.
Right. Listen, it's actually a whole nother learning session for us to really study the sacred texts of our tradition. And what are, as Phyllis Tribble calls them, the great feminist theologian and teacher, not Jewish, a text of terror. We have them in our Torah too, texts of terror. And when we a couple of weeks in our weekly Torah cycle, when we look at Parshat Acharei Mot and Parshat Kedoshim, where in each of those places in Leviticus it says, basically a man shouldn't lie with a man as he does a woman. It's to'eva, that's the Hebrew word, often translated as abomination. And so, of course, our religion specifically sometimes focuses on that as a way to justify being anti-gay or anti-gay behavior, if you will, and particularly male behavior, because, of course, in a patriarchal system, women didn't count. It was bad to be a lesbian, but not as bad as being gay, or I won't say being gay. Let me clarify that. Particularly maybe gay anal sex. Let's be very clear. And of course, what evangelical Christians primarily and kind of fundamentalist groups pick up on and then build upon to say things like God invented Adam and Eve instead of Adam and Steve for their sloganeering. But I think our tradition, there's many more pieces in our Torah and prohibitions in our Torah about Shabbat and about how we treat the stranger than there are any mentions of particular behaviors of yes or no or what to do in an intimate situation. For me, the overarching themes of B'Tselem Elohim, the overarching themes Ahavta Re'echa Kamocha, love your neighbor as yourself, teach us about also how to treat one another, and whatever people's individual relationship with their God, and whatever they have to ask for forgiveness for violating Shabbat when they get to Yom Kippur, or other kinds of strictures. But as everybody I hope knows on this call is that as I said, I'm a Reform rabbi, and that's my training and my background and my denominational commitments. And the Reform movement has a long history of also understanding not only our Torah and our Talmudic tradition and Jewish legal tradition, but also understanding that we come to learn new things that God is constantly revealing and teaching us new things. And what we're learning is that we have to understand how our world has changed from the ancient world, how we come to look at science and psychology as well as balancing that against our tradition. And these sciences, if you will, are gifts from God, if we believe that in our tradition. And so we have to take that knowledge and use it well. And so maybe someday we can have a Zioness learning session on some of these more specific texts and ways to parse the text. But let's just say for me, I believe, especially as a social justice activist, someone who's committed to human rights and civil rights, Every human being deserves to be treated fairly and equally under the law of the land, first of all. And I believe also in our community, the respect and dignity of every single person should be uplifted and upheld for every Jew everywhere, and we need to embrace that, and we need to help our institutions in the Jewish community be inclusive and welcoming, because this is what I say, Amanda, we don't have a Jew to waste. Just yesterday, we observed Yom HaShoah v'Hagvura, the Day of Holocaust Remembrance. And, you know, we are still a people that are small in number, and we need to make sure our tent is wide and open and welcoming and embracing for every Jew who wants to be a part of our community. And I think that's part of what the work I've done to include LGBTQ people into the fabric, into the mainstream of the Jewish world.
And I really have to say, I really feel like this book is going to help the institutions of the Jewish community be more inclusive, because it gives so many opportunities. You know, it is just so powerful in that it's hard to imagine ever not using this book for your prayers. If you're me, especially as a non-religious person, and that's part of another question that I have for you, which is about how inclusive it is and how much it has for everyone, for, you know, as we already went through the L and the G and the B and the T and the Q, but, you know, for allies, for people of faith, for people who are culturally Jewish, for people who are not Jewish, for, I mean, there's so much that's interfaith in here. And,
Right.
you know, you and I talked a little bit already, and I really wanted to share this with people, that if you don't have the book, you have to get it. There is a prayer for online dating. There is a prayer for freezing your eggs. There is a prayer, well, it's not a prayer. There are instructions on how to make a rainbow challah. There's a prayer for getting tested for HIV and what happens if you do get tested for HIV. So, you know, these are things that we've all done. You know, we all get tested for things all the time. And I know, you know, today in this world of coronavirus, people are getting tested and getting, you know, positive, coming back with positive results. And Denise, I know you want to reflect on that. But there's really something for everyone, and I love that.
I think that's it. And I you know, I noticed a couple of questions that came through, that non-binary is an identity, and I agree, it is. And that's why we included it specifically here. Many different things besides what I read in that one blessing, as part of the rainbow of this book of Mishkan Ga'ava, Mishkan meaning tabernacle, Ga'ava meaning pride, so the tabernacle of pride. And somebody else had asked a question about Israeli queer rabbis. Actually, the Hebrew liturgical editor was Rabbi Efrat Rotem. Rabbi Rotem was rabbi in Tel Aviv at one of the Reform congregations. She's a noted activist in the LGBTQ and Reform communities, and she helped us with this book. And she co-edited in terms of at least the Hebrew to make sure our liturgical Hebrew was good, and understood the intent of the author in helping us. So there's Israeli contribution in this book as well.
Okay, two things. I know you wanted to reflect on testing positive for things, and then just a quick thing for the person who commented, thank you for including non-binary folks. I say this as a Jewish lesbian mama of a non-binary kiddo. We really appreciate it. And if you don't have this book already, you have to get the book, because there are prayers for parents of kids who are either in the process of coming out or haven't come out yet. And one of the things that, you know, I really loved, and I want to find actually my notes on this because I want to really write what I was feeling, but something really powerful I thought in this book, at least as I read it, and Denise, correct me if I read it wrong, but there was an acknowledgement of unintentional prejudice, of the fact that, you know, we live in a world where there is systemic bias, or there are blind spots, or there are bigotries, and whatever it is that's manifesting, we hold things that we don't intend to hold, and maybe we don't want to hold, but it's just part of the culture that we live in and that we grow up in. And so, you know, for people who genuinely want to be strong allies but still harbor biases totally unintentionally, there's something in there for them too. And it's almost like the book is saying, you're off the hook. We know that this exists in the world, and here's how you can be better and stronger and, and more understanding and more compassionate to the people in your life that you love, that you want to have equality and that you want to fight for. And it's okay if you don't understand it, because, and did I read that right?
I think you're close. Here's what I would say. I think the attitude and the intention with which I started to write this book and collected, and we picked and cultivated the prayers. Some we solicited from specific people to write of their experiences. What the intention behind it was, we're all in the process of becoming. We're all in the process of becoming more of ourselves, whoever we want to be and whoever God wants us to be, and what we aspire to be. That means we're never going to be perfect. We're always going to be becoming. And we all bear and hold, as you said, unintentional biases. We're informed by the world we live in. That doesn't mean that you are specifically anti-LGBTQ. You might be mindless about it. You might not be thinking about it. It might just have been something that you grew up with, or an assumption that you might make about somebody, but you didn't necessarily mean it harm. That's what I love. One of the things about being Jewish is we can say chatati, I sinned, I made a mistake, I erred. And we have a process of teshuvah, of forgiveness, and a process of allowing for that growth in our human nature and our character to become a better person, and to become more conscious and more aware of the biases that we. So I think that is part of the intention here, to help become a better person, as you said, a better ally, a more compassionate and loving person. Listen, gay people, gay men, sometimes are misogynist. Some women don't like men, right? Lesbian and gay people, sometimes they don't. Why are trans people part of our movement? I've heard that comment before. I'm not saying that's my view. I think so. So we all bear. There are different ones of us who bear different assumptions, different isms, different. That's where I would call, how do we grow beyond our stereotypes? How do we grow beyond the, as you said, the implicit biases that we hold? And I think that's one of the gifts of this book, is to help us get into different experiences and to see it as the primary lens rather than as a secondary or tertiary lens. I want to just comment on this notion about testing positive. Something I still run a Jewish HIV support group. I've done it for nearly 30 years. I run the only Jewish HIV support group in the country. It meets once a month at my congregation. There's still stigma attached to becoming HIV positive. I know there are, great treatments and drugs. There's PrEP to help people from getting HIV, but there's still plenty of issues and problems and health problems. There's no cure for HIV. And so there are in here, one by Rabbi Eric Weiss of the Bay Area Jewish Healing Center, who wrote a prayer before testing for HIV. Again, it could be not just for a gay man, it could be for anybody who's testing for HIV. And then there's another prayer here, again written by Rabbi Ahuva Zaks. We read her prayer for non-binary before. Prayer after testing HIV positive. It's one of there's a couple in here, and a couple of prayers for testing negative as well. But I want us to just reflect in the situation we're in now in the time of coronavirus, because when we say somebody's tested positive today, that whole language is completely different, right? And so I will tell you, for the people in my support group, when they first heard Chris Cuomo live on CNN and say, "I've tested positive," my phone blew up. They're all texting me, "Rabbi, did you listen? This was the language that was our language of being HIV positive. Now we hear those words in a different context." I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying it is, again, the development of how things develop. So, this is a prayer after testing HIV positive. I wonder if it could be used as a prayer for testing after HIV, as coronavirus positive. So I'm just going to share the prayer. Elohei v'Elohei Avotai, my God and God of my ancestors. I've been waiting anxiously for test results now, only to have my fear confirmed. Positive. I feel scared and yet numb, completely overwhelmed. O source of wisdom, help me to remember this isn't the death sentence that it used to be. Source of strength, help me to face each day bravely as I adjust to a new normal of taking medication, responsibility for the health of myself and the safety of my future partners. Source of life, help me to persist in the face of this obstacle and to recognize that my life may be somewhat different now, but it is far from over. Odeni Khan, Odeni Chai, I am still here, I am still alive. Baruch atah Adonai Machor Chayim. Blessed are you, Adonai, source of life. So the question is, can we adapt even things that are really brand new here for the situations that we're in, to gain inspiration, to gain hope, to gain comfort, to gain solace, and to have our lives expressed in the fullness of our lives. That's what Mishkan Ga'ava, where pride dwells, is trying to do, and trying to make the LGBTQ plus experience an experience of life and a view of the world that is positive, that is loving, that is embracing, that is inclusive, and yes, as you say, helping teach compassion to all who read it.
I love that. I really love that. So I have a few more questions, but I'll just ask one and then we can go to the Q&A. And I know there's one question in there at least, and I think there might be more in the chat. So basically this comes up throughout the book, but there were a couple of times that I noticed particularly, I wrote down in quotes about express LGBTQ pride in Jewish language. The book is about express LGBTQ pride in Jewish language, but the things that I wrote down were none of us should have to compartmentalize any part of our identity. And you talk about shlemut, completeness, and it's obviously such an important part of what Zioness is. And, thinking as I was reading this book and thinking about your work, Denise, as a trailblazer for LGBTQ equality, and especially in the Jewish community. I know you worked far outside of the Jewish community in this battle, but in the focus within the Jewish community, it's so fascinating because within the Jewish community, we are also asked to check a different piece of our identity at the door, and then outside of it, of course, much more, the Zionism. And so Zioness, for you to be doing this work on LGBTQ equality in the Jewish community and then the Zionism outside the Jewish community, there's so many parallels. And as a Zioness board member, I was just hoping you could reflect on how you personally have been asked in so many different ways to check a piece of yourself at the door, and you've overcome those demands. And so for all the people who are watching who don't have the courage that you do, what advice would you give? And that's it.
Matter. Listen, I'm in a profession that was, when I started out as a rabbi, there weren't that many women rabbis, right? So often I'd had to check my femaleness, my womanness at the door. What role models? Weren't very many models. I've had to check my queer identity, my lesbian identity at the door often. I'm a mom. I have a grown son. Like some circles, I have to check my parent identity. There's no room to be a parent. So I have to check I've had to check, as you know, my Jewish identity in some circles, and I grew up in the South, so I know what that's really like. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and so there were plenty of places that you didn't talk about being Jewish. You and I, Amanda, both know what it means to have to check our Zion credentials, our love for Israel and the people of Israel and the land of Israel. Even if we disagree with certain policies of Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, we've had to check those in progressive circles, and I'm not willing to sacrifice any single part of myself. I am who I am. Love it or leave it, and I'm not going to please everybody, but I have and say, well, I've have a few years on you yet, Amanda. So I've learned the hard way, and I would say to all the Zionesses, particularly that are out there, men and women Zionesses, non-binary Zionesses, one foot at a time, one step at a time. You're not going to be able to, in every situation, we have to make sure we're safe, first of all. That's the most important thing. You have to have allies, and you have to have people around you who share your experience and your ideas, and that helps you gain courage. to not be out there only by yourself. So if you are someone who is politically progressive, and you also are someone who's a Zionist and loves Israel and wants what Israel to be what it should be and could be the great dream of Israel, even when it doesn't get there, then you need to become a Zioness. Women, men, non-binary, trans people, we need you. We need to shape the Israel we dream of. We need to shape the America that we demand and dream of, to be a place of inclusion, whether it's around gender identity, sexual orientation. We need America that serves everyone. And we can make that happen when we work together and we join as members of the Zioness movement. And that's why I love our organization, Amanda, and I'm so committed to it. Lesbian, as a Jew, as a rabbi, as a mom, and as a passionate Zionist.
Well, I just want to say how much it means to me to have you as a leader of this movement. And it's really hard to express. A lot of people believe a lot of things, but not a lot of people dedicate the time and energy that you do to the things that you care about. And for you to have joined this board with all the other things on your plate, I mean, as I mentioned, if you at the beginning, when I was reading just a fraction of Denise's bio, you need to go to the Call on Me website, Congregation Call on Me in West Hollywood, and read her bio, the things that this woman has taken on, the battles that she's fought, that she's led in. It's beyond. I mean, it's extraordinary, Denise. And so, for me to have you as a mentor has meant more than I can ever express. And thank you so much. Okay.
I love.
You just broke up. Say that again.
I love working together. And I look forward to meeting more of our Zionesses around the country. And I'm just going to say one more plug for the book. If you are interested at all, you can go to the CCAR website, CCARpress, PRESS.org. Ava, Where Pride Dwells. That's the landing page that you'll see. We put it up in the chat before, the link. You can put in a hashtag, Where Pride Dwells, and search for it. But it's available now. It's available in stock at the Central Conference of American Rabbis Press, CCARpress.org. I think it's also available on Amazon.
Well, I never would have signed off without doing that. I was going to do a couple of questions, but we're going to do that again. We're going to plug the book again after these couple of questions. So one of the questions, Elazar Ben Lulu wrote to the panelists, Rabbi Denise, thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I would like to ask two questions. One, queer Israeli rabbis are they included in your book? You answered that already. How do the prayers expose theoretical clashes between LGBT view, which sometimes uses the biological terminology of born to be, B'Tselem Elohim, and queer view, which sees LGBT as social, cultural performance, social construction? Both are totally different views on LGBTQ internal politic. I appreciate your answer.
Look, this is not a book for internal politics. This is a book of prayers, spiritual reflections, and meditations. It does have a theological view, and that's the difference between prayers and sociology. And so, as I said earlier, this book really has the opportunity to have a number of people give voice to what their experiences have been. And so this is a book about real lived experience, not an academic research and debate between those who view gender identity and sexual orientation as some social construct, or versus those who believe it's those of us who believe that's our human nature, blessed by God or the spirit of the universe. Call it whatever you want to call it. This book, I think, it really isn't the academics as much as it is the lived, real, emotional, psychological, and spiritual experience of queer people. And they're
beautiful. So there actually aren't, somebody just wrote, love this book so much even before reading it. I love that. So please order it. So we are going to send out a short follow-up email, just a 3-question survey to everyone who registered, and there will be a link to purchase the book. It came in like 3 days from CCAR Press. We're going to post it also on the Facebook so that people can buy it. And I'm sure that Denise is going to be doing more of these with CCAR and Call on Me and elsewhere. And I just want to say for people who are not registered, tomorrow Zioness is doing a webinar at 3 p.m. Eastern with Bakari Sellers. We're going to be talking about elections, the institutions of democracy, how to protect them, how to make sure that every American has their right to vote protected, even in the time of coronavirus, when so many primaries have been extended, and there are so many challenges to voting rights and so many new creative ways of suppressing the vote. So please join us for that. And you can register at zioness.org/events. And then while you're there, sign up for our mailing list so that you can get lots of information about more amazing events like this and the trailblazing work of our incredible board members. So Denise, thank you so much. You are a superstar.
Thanks, Amanda. You're a superstar. We and thank you all to all the Zionesses and future Zionesses, women, men, non-binary folks watching and participating today around the world. We come and join us all the time and help
All
us
the
make
time.
a world a better.
Yes, that's the goal. So good night. And if anyone has questions, feel free to email us at about@zioness.org. Good night.